The Memphis Grizzlies have a basketball game tonight, and Bobby Marks had a really interesting trade idea involving Luka Doncic for Memphis, assuming he was available to the entire league and not just the Los Angeles Lakers earlier on this season. But I'm going to lead off this episode finally taking a stand on what folks that are arguing against Ja Morant and the celebration discourse, what they're getting wrong, what they're missing. We're going to lead off with that on this edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host for this episode of the podcast, Joe Mullinax. So happy to have you with me. No to Michael Cole today, Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. He is under the weather, so sending good vibes, good energy to DeMichael. Hopefully he'll be back with us to talk Grizzlies Hornets, a big one coming up with the Timberwolves, and so much more on our next episode of Locked On Grizzlies. But for the next 30 minutes, you and I are going to take a Memphis Grizzlies journey together. And hopefully you're an everydayer every time an episode drops, whether it's me, DeMichael, and a combo of the two of us. Hopefully you are with us on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, wherever you get podcasts. Hopefully you are a part of our everyday Memphis Grizzlies experience as proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. And also, thank you again 1,000 times over. I have to double check the numbers every time I look to believe it. We have been doing a phenomenal job with the newsletter, lockedondaily.com. Our daily subscriber count at this moment, over 2,200 subscribers. That's top 6 in the entire Locked On NBA sphere. That's wonderful. Thank you again 1,000 times for that. It is appreciated. Please go to lockedondaily.com. We're going to talk about later on in the show how you can get entered into a drawing for being a subscriber to Locked On Grizzlies. Lots of cool prizes, including Game Time and Fanatics gift cards. You're not going to want to miss that, so make sure you're checking out lockedondaily.com and being a subscriber to our free daily newsletter. All right. For the most part, DeMichael and I haven't addressed the Ja Morant gun celebration 3-point make issue that isn't really an issue because, to be honest with you, I don't want to insult your intelligence. I don't want to speak for DeMichael. I'm speaking for me when I say this. I don't want to insult you, dear listener, dear viewer, because if you are here, chances are, more often than not, you are going to be a supporter of the Memphis Grizzlies, and you know why the Ja Morant discourse is not fair to Ja Morant when it comes to the gun celebration from 3. Buddy Hield did it first. Buddy Hield did not receive a warning from the NBA, or excuse me, Buddy Hield, did not receive a fine from the NBA after he blatantly disregarded their advisement of don't do this again, buddy. It was made clear that both Ja and Buddy were told, hey, keep this under wraps now. Ja did absolutely do the celebration the very next night, but so did Buddy Hield. I didn't see anything about a fine for Buddy Hield. It was there for Ja Morant, $75,000, a pretty substantial fine. I have no issue with Ja Morant being fined for tugging on the cape of the worst commissioner in professional sports. Adam Silver has allowed for the National Basketball Association in so many ways to become a laughingstock, whether it's the NBA All-Star Game, the fact that they get more traction in their offseason in terms of free agency moves and trade rumors and things of that nature than the actual games themselves. The fact that you have a media body in the NBA on TNT and elsewhere where instead of talking about the greatest athletes on the planet, which is what I believe NBA basketball players to be, soaring through the air, running down the court at phenomenal speeds, being able to do the things they do. They're the best athletes on planet Earth for my money. Instead of talking about that, you have Shaquille O'Neal and all of these other people waxing nostalgically about a bygone era, which I grew up on that basketball. I've said on this podcast time and again, I prefer the physicality of basketball. I like getting a little physical down low. I'm a believer in basketball being a contact sport. That's me. That's not everybody's way of interpreting and taking in the game, and that's fine. But I want to stress, I did enjoy when Shaq played. Shaq was my favorite player as a big man when I played basketball. I loved watching Shaq play on the post. I love that form of the game. All he does is crap on it. And numerous other former players crap all over the modern product. Part of the reason they do that is they're allowed to. They have been given an opportunity through these media outlets to say and do whatever they want. Say what you want about David Stern, but I promise you the messaging around this league would be vastly different if Stern were involved. And the structure and the way that these things were being instituted would be very, very different. That's explaining why I don't like Adam Silver, because I want to stress David Stern would probably be very strict when it comes to the Ja Morant celebration. But I also want to reconnect it to Stern because he wouldn't let this celebration be a thing in the first place. And that is what people were missing. Who gets hurt by this celebration? What laws did Ja Morant break? I'll wait. Go look them up. Put them in the comments. Give me a link. Where are the gun charges? Where's the gun charges? Where are the followed through, went to court, he's been convicted of a crime, he had to do something along those lines? Pull them up. The anger from some regarding Ja Morant, how dare he do the exact same gun celebration that half the league does? And it makes you mad because you remember what Ja did 2 years ago, which was dumb and immature. And I was hard on Ja then. I most certainly am not somebody that is a Ja Morant apologist when it comes to what has happened the last 2 years. You can very easily argue that a lot of the issues that have happened to this franchise since they were at their peak a couple of years ago, their pinnacle. Remember, there was a Memphis Grizzlies day on ESPN. Ja Morant was the future of American basketball. All of that happened. But it's important to understand that a lot of what has been lost via self-inflicted wounds. That's entirely fair. I agree with that. This whole thing that's been happening the last week is ridiculous because who we really should be concerned with is the audience that does not have the context of Ja Morant was irresponsibly displaying and holding and carrying guns. Talk about a 9-year-old watching the Los Angeles Lakers play. His favorite player is Austin Reeves. AR-15 is his nickname. He loves to watch Austin Reeves play with his teammate Dalton Knecht, who does the exact same celebration that Ja Morant and others do, or a variation of it. Acting and mimicking as if he has a gun in his possession and he is utilizing the weapon, which, by the way, Ja Morant never did. It's a harmless celebration when Dalton Knecht does it, but it's not a harmless celebration when Ja Morant does. You know who doesn't understand that? My 9-year-old daughter, my 6-year-old daughter, my 4-year-old son. They don't get that. You, not talking to you, dear listener, dear viewer, saying rhetorically, you, as an adult, should be able to understand that it's a meaningless celebration. To a kid, they're watching a superhero. They are watching one of their icons, especially for a franchise like the Los Angeles Lakers. Memphis Grizzlies are the smallest market in the NBA. How many people saw the tweet from the Lakers, the highlight of the literal pointing of the handgun, literally, figuratively, however you want to describe it, the celebration on that social media post, or saw the highlights on YouTube or TikTok the next day? That is where my concern is. If you think it's inappropriate to do that celebration because Ja Morant is doing it, kids don't care about that. If you think the celebration is wrong because of what they are mimicking, then it's wrong for everyone. It's not okay for anybody to do it. Picking on Ja Morant in this particular instance is unfair. saying that it's Buddy Hield doesn't have a gun connection, Buddy Hield doesn't have those things. Buddy Hield was warned, just like Ja Morant. Buddy Hield was not fine. Ja Morant was. There's lots of other people that have done lots of other things in the NBA that have not warranted the amount of think pieces that I've had to read this week about this nonsense. If you really want to be outraged, be outraged about what the young audience of this league, the future payers of money, what they are being influenced by these guys doing. And if you don't think it's a big deal when Buddy Hield does it, then it shouldn't be a big deal when Ja Morant does it. If it's a big deal when Ja does it, it should be a big deal when everybody does it. In this particular instance, what Ja Morant did in the past is irrelevant because an adult should be able to separate that and a child cannot. And they're the ones watching and mimicking what they see their heroes do, whether they want to be role models or not. Let me know how you feel in the comments. Hit me up on X at Joe Mullinax. I'm going to do my best to not talk anymore about that. And I promise I was trying to avoid it, but I just saw some interactions on social media that I really wanted to address it. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, I'm going to get it back into basketball and my favorite version of talking about the NBA. Potential trades that almost certainly will not happen or weren't going to happen, but it makes for good content and good conversation. We'll talk about that next. Stick around. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privileged are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%, plus you also get 4% APY on your cash and non-retirement accounts. That's over 8 times the national savings average. The perks of the high net worth are now available to any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive your 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate subject to change. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at $5 a month for 1 year from first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to robinhood.com/boost. Over 8 times the national average savings account interest rate claim is based on data from the FDIC as of November 18th, 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. Go and check them out today. So Bobby Marks went on social media, went on ESPN, where he works, in fairness to Bobby Marks, and he wrote an article entitled "What 28 Other NBA Teams Could Have Traded for Luka Doncic." And that is the story that will never die, right? Unfortunately for Nick, one of my bosses over at Locked On, who runs Locked On Mavericks, and everybody associated with Dallas, they'd love for it to not be real, but it very much is. Luka Doncic now a member of the Los Angeles Lakers. And that trade has lots of different caveats, right? The whole purpose of this deal occurring was the understanding that there was going to be secrecy, right? And Bobby Marks writes about that. One of the reasons this deal went down is the fact that the entire league was not privy to the information. It was that shocking. It was that closely guarded of a secret. But if you would open it up to the entire league, that allows for teams like the Memphis Grizzlies getting involved in the conversation, or a team like the Cleveland Cavaliers, who I think make one of the best offers. Darius Garland, Jarrett Allen, and a 2031 unprotected first-round pick for Luka Doncic. Maxi Kleber also would have been included in the deal for the Mavs. I thought that was a pretty good trade. Trae Young and Okongwu from Atlanta. That's not a terrible trade. That's an all-star for an all-star, and technically those guys have already been traded for each other once upon a time, right? But this isn't Locked On Hawks. This is Locked On Grizzlies. The Memphis Grizzlies trade that was suggested. Desmond Bane, Jalen Wells, Brandon Clark, and 2 unprotected first-round picks, 2027 and 2029. This is directly from Bobby Marks' story. Luka Doncic deals 28 other NBA teams could have made an offer for. Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., or Ja Morant, one of the Grizzlies' 3 young stars, would need to be the starting point of a blockbuster Doncic trade. Bane is the choice here, as the Grizzlies' front court would be depleted if Jackson were sent to Dallas. Plus, Morant has 2 more years on his deal compared to Doncic. So the idea here is Bane is the more stable contract, certainly not as much money. You're still getting a good young prospect in Jalen Wells, somebody who's going to be on the first team all-rookie for this coming season. And of course, you are also getting Brandon Clark, pretty solid basketball player, a winning basketball player. As I've said several times on this show, he's a 16-game player in the playoffs. Memphis misses him terribly, and they will miss him in the upcoming postseason. If this were able to get Luka Doncic, I would sprint to Dallas and beg them to make the deal. And I love Desmond Bane. Again, if you're an everydayer here on Locked On Grizzlies, you know how I feel about Desmond Bane. That is a trade. If you have Jaren Jackson Jr., Ja Morant, and Luka Doncic, that is a championship contending team for years to come. You have 3 of the top 30 or so players in the NBA on your team. Those first round picks that you sent out that are unprotected, I would include a 2031. I would have sent an additional first because you're not going to need it. That's going to be a late 20s pick as long as the team is healthy. And that is a big what if, especially with Ja. We know that. But can you imagine Ja Morant and Luka Doncic in the same backcourt? All the different things that they could do, how much better they would make their teammates. It's staggering to ponder. Now, would Luka choose to re-sign in Memphis? That's a fun hypothetical. Probably not. But other times that Memphis has made trades for players like that, not the caliber of Luka, of course, but when they've made trades for guys in the past, they come to love Memphis. Maybe they wouldn't choose Memphis as a free agency destination, but when they're forced to, for lack of a better word, they appreciate their time and they like the city because the city's awesome. It's just maybe not where young multimillionaires wouldn't be their first pick for free agency destination. Fair enough. I would do that trade in a heartbeat. I don't think Dallas does it. I don't think Bane is good enough. I think they demand Ja. And in this hypothetical, which is totally fun to talk about, but not actually going to happen because Luka Doncic is going to sign with the Lakers and hang out there. At least you would imagine, right? Certainly Luka's not going to leave, right? Maybe, I guess, but seems unlikely. He's the heir apparent to the throne in Los Angeles basketball. Going to be hard to turn down, especially with all the money that's going to come along with it. Would you tag Ja into that trade? For me, the answer is yes, because it's Luka Doncic. And you can yell at me in the comments and you can hit me up on X at Joe Mullinax and tell me why I'm a big dumb dummy and how Ja Morant is so significant to the Grizzlies. I just spent the entire show arguing in favor of Ja Morant over something that I think is ridiculous. I personally would not do the celebration that Ja is doing. And yeah, I wish Ja would read the room a little bit better. And yeah, I'm frustrated that the Grizzlies team that I have followed since 2011, that I've covered and written about or podcasted about in some way, shape, or form since 2013, 12 years now of Joe Mullinax doing this work. Sorry for talking about myself in the third person. I don't know why I did that. I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated that it's possible Ja Morant is part of the reason that the championship window for this team might be closed before it even had a chance to really open. That's possible. More possible now than it was 2 years ago. But you have to be able to acknowledge that Luka Doncic is just better. Just like Giannis is better than Jaren Jackson Jr. Is that conversation closer? Yeah, because I think Jaren is an all-NBA player this year, and Giannis is also an all-NBA player. He's going to be first-team all-NBA. Jaren will not be first-team all-NBA. Giannis is better than Jaren. I would do Giannis for Jaren because they're better players. Luka is better than Ja. But what the other pieces around the trade look like, that's where I get interested. Do you stick with Brandon Clark? Do you throw in an additional pick to try to keep Clark since Ja is superior to Bane in terms of basketball value? Lots of interesting questions there. But I thought that Bobby Marks's article was most interesting because it reiterated the ridiculousness of that entire exchange. Here sit the Los Angeles Lakers with possibly one of the luckiest general managers in the history of basketball in Rob Pelinka. Pelinka did nothing to negotiate and get Luka Doncic. It essentially fell into his lap, this guy. And now the Lakers are beating the Oklahoma City Thunder, and now the Lakers are primed to be a title contender for years to come because they have this dude on their roster. Thanks a lot, Dallas Mavericks. Would have been cool to have Luka on the Grizzlies, but wasn't meant to be and almost certainly will never happen. But after the Doncic Anthony Davis trade, never say never, I suppose. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to close out this episode of the show talking about actual real basketball now. Grizzlies Hornets tonight. I think you understand why we talked about the Luka Doncic trade article, right? This should be a win for Memphis, but we'll talk about why and how coming up next here on the show. Stick around. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Betterhelp. Taking care of your mental health is just as important as taking care of your physical health, but traditional in-person therapy can be expensive, often ranging from $100 to $250 per session. That's where Betterhelp comes in. With online therapy, you get quality care at a price that makes sense, saving you both time and money. Therapy isn't just for life's toughest moments. It can help you with everyday stress, learning how to set boundaries. Maybe you're having issues with a coworker, developing positive coping skills as you're working through the challenges that everyday life brings. Having access to support when you need it can make all the difference in the world. Your well-being is worth investing in. Visit betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA, betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA. We close out this episode of the show, and I apologize. I don't want to be disrespectful to the Charlotte Hornets. They've had a rough season, right? 19-59, woof, limping to the finish line. The Hornets very much in the tankathon standings. Instead of going and looking at the NBA standings, they're going to tankathon for the Hornets every day. And they're in a pretty solid spot when it comes to tanking. They currently have the number 3 slot. And it's going to be hard for New Orleans to catch them from 4. It's going to be hard for Washington to fall back from 2. The Hornets are probably going to hang around in that 3 space, right? It's important to remember that in terms of the lottery, the rules are different now. The Hornets have a 52% chance as of this recording to be in the top 4 and a 14% chance at the number 1 overall pick. But Utah has the same amount of chance. So does the Washington Wizards. New Orleans, as of this recording, has a 12.5% chance at the 4 spot, and then the Philadelphia 76ers at 10.5. They've done a masterful job of tanking, am I right? Lost their last 11 games. They are 0-10, naturally. In their last 10, Philly is in line to get a pretty good pick in this upcoming draft. I never want to overlook an opponent. That's important. They're NBA players, right? The starting lineup that played against the Chicago Bulls recently included Miles Bridges, speaking of guys that people should be more mad about than Ja Morant. Mark Williams, who was almost traded to the Los Angeles Lakers in a deal that would have been very interesting, a big like Mark Williams next to Luka Doncic. Seth Curry has had a strong NBA career. You have all sorts of different guys that can go off in any specific game. Josh Okogie, they are worthy of respect. And through one quarter against the Bulls recently, it was 29-28 in Charlotte. Chicago, obviously not as good as Memphis, but it was a competitive game for a quarter. And then the Bulls went on a 46-27 run in the second quarter, and the game was pretty much over. That's what the Grizzlies need to do against this Charlotte Hornets team. The injury report is pretty barren. Only Brandon Clark is on it. Ja Morant, no longer sick. Vince Williams Jr., no longer sick. Those guys are back in the mix. They should be available to play against Charlotte. They shouldn't have to play very long. Because this is a Charlotte team that wants to lose. And if you want to argue that they're an NBA team, they're not trying to lose, Joe, that's fair. They don't have the horses to win. The front office does not want to win. The coaches and the players show up every day. They want to compete. The front office for the Hornets, if the Grizzlies lose this game, they're going to be pissed. And Memphis is very much in a position where they should be trying to win every game possible. I talked about on yesterday's show how there were so many teams with the same record in the NBA. Los Angeles Clippers, as of this recording, 46-32. Golden State Warriors, 46-32. Minnesota Timberwolves, 46-32. Memphis Grizzlies, 46-32. Holy crap. 4 teams tied with the same exact record. That's wild. That's crazy. How is that possible, you might be asking? That's a great freaking question. This last week of the season is going to be gigantic. All of these teams are in action, and all these teams are going to be scoreboard watching. And Memphis has arguably the easiest game of all of them against the Hornets. Because you have to look at the rest of the scoreboard and you see Minnesota playing the Bucks. Giannis is probably going to play in that game. That's not going to be easy. You're going to have Golden State against Phoenix. That's a win. That's a game that Phoenix should win, but it's not going to be easy. The Clippers are playing the Spurs. Again, a game that the Clippers should win, but it's not necessarily going to be easy for them. Memphis has to handle their business and then worry about other teams' scoreboards. The point that I'm making is at least tonight, Memphis has the easiest game of the three other teams that they are currently tied with in terms of seeding. Handle your business, and maybe you are in a better spot at the end of the night than you were at the start of it. You have to go in and you have to control the boards. That is a massive piece of this. Mark Williams is a big dude. Mark Williams is a legitimate player, 7 foot tall, an impressive standing reach. He has done a lot of strong stuff in recent games for the Hornets. Yes, Charlotte is losing a lot of basketball. They're trying to lose. We've talked about that. Their only win in recent games has been against Utah, right? In the last 6, that's the only game that the Hornets have picked up a win, a fellow tanking team. But he had 18 points and 13 rebounds in that game. Against the Bulls, he had 22 points and 9 rebounds, 16 points, 12 rebounds in a loss to the Pacers recently. Numerous double-doubles, 4 in a row to be exact. That is probably the player that you have to contain the most. Because if you don't contain him, he's going to go off and he's going to create issues for your front court. Now, the good news for the Grizzlies, and we talked about this on yesterday's show, is Zach Edey has also been getting into a rhythm. And that's going to be a really fun matchup, the matchup of the game, Williams against Edey. But beyond that matchup, I am looking at the backcourt of the Grizzlies. Ja Morant, assuming he plays, and Desmond Bane. Kobe White for the Bulls in 35 minutes played against Charlotte had 37 points, 12 of 16 shooting. Josh Giddey had 23 points, 10 rebounds, 8 assists in 34 minutes played. Kobe White's having a heck of the second half of the season. Josh Giddey, a bounce-back year considering where he was this time last year, being traded for Alex Caruso, all that stuff. Desmond Bane and Ja Morant are better than Kobe White and Josh Giddey. The Hornets don't have the horses in the backcourt, and Memphis has enough in the front court to be able to handle those guys if they can get a continued performance from Edey. Patas Bucelis is someone to keep an eye on. He's had some success, or excuse me, he's on the Bulls. My mistake. We talked about Okogie, solid defender. Miles Bridges struggled against the Bulls, but he has had strong offensive performances. Seth Curry, capable of going off from 3 on any given night. Nurkic coming off the bench in 16 minutes against the Bulls. He had 18 points. So the center position is an interesting one. And again, that big man battle is going to be where you keep your eyes. But there's no one on the perimeter that can really handle Ja and Bane. Should be a strong outing for them, to say the least. Memphis should win this one by double digits, hopefully be able to rest some in the fourth quarter, heading into the biggest game of their season so far with the Minnesota Timberwolves at home, a chance to pick up a big win. Hopefully they're able to take advantage of it, but they got to get through Charlotte first. Let me know in the comments. Hit me up on X. How are you feeling about tonight's game? Not trying to overlook Charlotte, but it's a game that Memphis should win if they are who we think they are. If they play the way they did against Detroit, they'll win this game by double digits, and that was without Ja Morant. Ja should be back in the lineup tonight. Thank you so much for being with me on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies, and it's pretty exciting. The Memphis Grizzlies getting ready for postseason basketball. We know there will at least be play-in games to be played, potentially playoff games. Locked On Grizzlies has you covered every step of the way. Make sure you're subscribing to the Locked On Grizzlies podcast newsletter for expert analysis, insider insights, and all of the playoff action delivered straight to your inbox for free. As a subscriber, you will be entered to win one of 3 amazing prizes. There's a $2,500 Best Buy gift card to upgrade your Sports Cave setup, a $300 Game Time gift card, and a $200 Fanatics gift card. It is easy and free to enter. Simply subscribe to the podcast newsletter between April 7th, 2025 and April 30th, 2025 to be automatically entered to win. Do not miss a moment of the playoff run, hopefully, for Memphis. Join the Locked On Grizzlies newsletter today and experience the playoffs like never before. Subscribe today and enter to win by clicking the link in the description of this episode. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe wherever you get podcasts. We're proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, literally anywhere. Become an everydayer and hang out with Michael and I each and every time that an episode drops. Again, lockedondaily.com. Go subscribe to our free daily newsletter. Thanks to everybody that has already done that. Become one of those that jumps in on that process. Enjoy the game tonight. Hopefully it's a win, and hopefully when you come back tomorrow, we're talking a victory over the Hornets, taking a look at the standings, who Memphis should and shouldn't be aiming for in terms of playoff potential competition, even play-in potential competition, and so much more. Michael and I will tackle that on tomorrow's show. I'm Joe Mullinax. Thank you so much for being with me on today's episode. Free and available wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Amazon, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere and everywhere. We'll catch you tomorrow. Have a good one.